The first time my son hung up on me, I told myself it was a bad connection. The second time, 3 years later, I finally understood it wasn't the phone that was broken. I'm going to tell you what happened on the night I retired after 45 years at the same company, and what happened 3 hours after that, when my phone started buzzing on a diner table in Dayton, Ohio, and didn't stop for the better part of an hour. Welcome to Dad's Pure Revenge. If you're new here, I'm glad you found us. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from tonight. And if stories like this one mean something to you, go ahead and hit subscribe before we get into it. You're going to want to see how this one ends. I want to start with Connor, because none of this makes sense without him. Connor is my nephew, my late brother Marcus's boy. Marcus died of a heart attack when Connor was 22. Standing in the bay of the auto shop he'd spent 15 years building on Route 4 outside of Springfield. Connor was there when it happened. He held his father's hand on that concrete floor until the ambulance came, and then he went back to work the next morning because the shop had 4 cars on lifts and customers who needed their brakes done by Friday. That's who Connor is. He kept that shop alive on nothing but stubbornness for 6 years. I'd stop by sometimes on a Saturday, and he'd already be there at 7 in the morning, with the bay doors open and coffee going cold on the workbench because he'd forgotten about it 3 sips in. He never asked me for a dime. Not once. When his transmission lift broke down 2 winters ago, he fixed it himself with parts from a salvage yard in Xenia, rather than take out another loan. He was drowning, slowly, and too proud to say so. My name is Russell Doyle. I'm 67 years old. I spent 45 years as a heavy machinery engineer at Titan Iron Works, the kind of place that used to be the backbone of this part of Ohio. I worked double shifts through 3 recessions. I missed 2 of my son's birthdays because a crane assembly line went down, and I was the only one who could get it running by morning. I told myself for years that the missed birthdays were the price of giving my family something solid. I never once stopped to ask if my son wanted something solid, or if he just wanted his father at the table on a Tuesday night. That's my honest fault in this story, and I own it. I built a fortress, and called it love, and I never checked whether anyone was living in it with me. My wife, Carol, passed 11 years ago. Ovarian cancer. She used to say Spencer, that's my son, had her stubbornness and my silence, which she said was the worst possible combination 2 people could hand down to a child. I laughed when she said it. I think about it differently now. On March the 3rd, at 9:14 in the morning, Titan Iron Works called to tell me they were retiring me with a gala. Not a sheet cake in the break room, a real event, at the Renaissance downtown in Columbus. Broadcast live on the State Business Channel, because Titan wanted to make a statement about 45 years of loyalty in an industry that doesn't reward loyalty anymore. I called Spencer before I even called my own sister. I remember exactly what I said. They're putting me on television, son. 45 years. I want you there. There was a pause on the line I didn't like the shape of. Dad, we already booked Cabo. Brooke's been planning this trip for 4 months. I told him the date was fixed, that I couldn't move a company gala for a vacation. He said, and I'm quoting this exactly because I've replayed it in my head more times than I can count. It's just another boring corporate dinner, Dad. You'll have 100 people there. You won't even notice we're gone. Brooke got on the phone after that, not to apologize, but to ask if I could understand their perspective. I told her I understood it fine. I hung up first. That almost never happens between a father and son, the father hanging up first. But I did it because I didn't trust my voice to stay steady if I kept talking. I sat in my kitchen on Maple Hollow Court for a long time after that call. The coffee maker clicked off. The dog next door barked twice and then quit. I didn't cry. I just sat there doing the math on how many missed dinners, missed games, missed everything had led to a son who could call his father's retirement boring, without so much as a flinch. That's when I thought of Connor. I called him on a Thursday evening. He was still at the shop. I could hear an impact wrench in the background. When I asked him to be my guest at the gala, he went quiet for a second, and then he said, "Uncle Russ, I'd be honored." I mean that. Not sure. Not, yeah, I guess I could. He said, honored. A 28-year-old kid running himself into the ground, trying to save his father's shop, and he still had room in him for that word. If you've ever had someone in your life who showed up for no reason, except that showing up is who they are, hit that like button right now. This story's about to need you rooting for him. The night of the gala, Connor arrived in a suit that didn't quite fit him. Sleeves a half-inch too long, the kind of thing you buy off a clearance rack because you've got $400 set aside for a transmission part and none for tailoring. He didn't care. He stood next to me at the head table with his hands folded like he was in church, and every few minutes he'd lean over and ask me quiet questions about people he didn't know. Genuinely curious, genuinely proud to be sitting there. The ballroom held maybe 300 people. Cameras from the State Business Network were set up at the back, red lights blinking. I gave a short speech about the men and women I'd worked beside for 4.5 decades, about a crane collapse in 1998 we'd fixed by hand in the rain, about the value of just being present, day after day, when nobody's watching. I looked at the empty seats where Spencer and Brooke should have been sitting, and then I looked at Connor, and I kept talking. Then Gerald Hutchins, Titan's CEO, took the stage with a folder under his arm, and I could tell by the shift in his voice that something was coming I hadn't been told about. Russell has given this company 45 years, he said. So this year, for the first time, Titan Iron Works isn't just handing out a retirement watch. We asked Russell to name the guest who represents his legacy best, the person who'd be standing beside him if this whole industry disappeared tomorrow. He named his nephew, Connor Doyle. I hadn't been told what that meant. I found out with everyone else, live, on camera. Connor runs an independent auto shop that's been fighting to survive for 6 years, Hutchins said. Tonight, in honor of Russell's 45 years of service, Titan Iron Works is awarding Connor an $850,000 legacy grant to expand that shop into a full-service center. The room went quiet, and then it didn't. Connor's hands were shaking on the tablecloth. He looked at me like he needed permission to believe it, and I just nodded, because I couldn't get words out either. The tears on his face weren't the kind people perform for cameras. I've seen that kind. This wasn't it. This was a young man who'd held his dying father's hand on a concrete floor, finally being told that the sacrifice meant something to somebody. We didn't stay for the after party. Connor and I ended up 2 hours later at a diner off Route 40 called the Blue Star, the kind of place with a laminated menu and coffee that never runs out. We ordered pie. He kept saying, "I don't understand," over and over, not because he didn't understand the money, but because he couldn't process being chosen. My phone was face down on the table between us. At 9:40 it buzzed. I flipped it over without much thought, and saw 11 missed calls, all from Spencer. I didn't call back yet. I wasn't ready. By 10:05, it was 29. Connor noticed my face and asked if everything was all right. I told him it would be. I wasn't lying, but I wasn't sure yet either. By 10:30, the count had climbed to 38, and the texts had started coming in underneath them. Fast, one after another. The kind of typing where you can feel the anger through the screen even before you open it. I finally read them around 10:45. Spencer's first text said, "Dad, what the hell did you do?" The next one, 2 minutes later, "That grant was supposed to be for family, for ME." Then Brooke, a minute after that. "We saw the broadcast on the resort TV. You need to call the company right now and fix this." I sat there in a booth that smelled like fryer oil and old coffee, reading the words, "fix this," like a decision I'd made in front of 300 people, and a television camera was a clerical error someone could correct with a phone call. By the time we left the diner, close to midnight, the count sat at 112. I hadn't answered a single one. I want to be honest with you about something. I wasn't furious. I thought I would be, if this moment ever came. I'd imagined, somewhere in the back of my mind over the years, a version of myself shouting into a phone, finally saying everything I'd swallowed. That's not what happened. What I actually felt, staring at that number, was something quieter and colder settling into place, like a door closing without needing to slam. I called Spencer back the next morning at 8 o'clock sharp, because I wasn't going to let him say later that I dodged him. He answered before the first ring finished. "Dad, you have to call Hutchins. Tell him it was a mistake. That money is supposed to come to me eventually anyway. That's basically my inheritance, and you just handed it to Connor on live TV. It's not a mistake, Spencer. You're punishing us for going on one trip." I told him, calm as I could manage, that I hadn't punished anyone. I'd simply asked myself a question the company had put in front of me. Who represents your legacy? And I'd answered it honestly. Nobody had forced him to book Cabo over his father's retirement. Nobody had told Brooke to call a corporate gift just another boring dinner. They'd made a choice, and Connor had made a different one. And the difference between those two choices was the whole answer. "So that's it? You're choosing him over your own son?" "I'm not choosing him over you, Spencer. I chose the person who showed up. You chose not to be one of the options." He hung up on me that time. I let him. 3 weeks later, my attorney, a woman named Patricia Renfro, who'd handled Carol's estate and mine for over a decade, called to ask if I wanted to revisit my will in light of everything. I'd been sitting with the question already. Spencer had never needed anything from me that he didn't get. Carol and I paid for his college outright, covered his wedding, co-signed the loan on his first house. Connor had never asked for a single thing in his life, and had lost his own father on a concrete floor at 22. I didn't rewrite the whole will out of spite. I want to be clear about that, because spite was never the engine here. I simply moved the family cabin up on Lake Erie, the one Carol and I bought the year Spencer was born, the one he hadn't visited in 6 years, into a trust that named Connor as caretaker, with the stipulation that it stay in the family for gatherings, holidays, whoever wanted to use it. Not locked away from Spencer, just no longer his to inherit and sell, which, I'd learned from a mutual friend, had been his plan for it all along. Spencer found out about the cabin from Patricia's office, not from me, 4 months after the gala. He called once. I let it go to voicemail, and later, when I listened, his voice wasn't angry this time. It was smaller. He said he didn't understand how it had gotten to this point between us. I think, if I'm honest, that's the first true thing he'd said to me in years. I didn't call him back that night either. I sat on my porch on Maple Hollow Court, with a cup of coffee going cold beside me, the way Connors always does at the shop, and I thought about how strange it is that the people who cost you the least are so often the ones who give you the most. Connor's shop reopened in September as Doyle & Sons Automotive, his idea, not mine. A small, stubborn tribute to a father who never got to see it finished. He put my name on a plaque by the door, not because I asked him to, but because he said the story didn't make sense without both of us in it. I go by most Saturdays now. He still forgets his coffee on the workbench. Some things don't change, and I've come to be grateful for that. Spencer and I talk sometimes. Not often, not easily. I don't know if we'll ever get back to what we were, and I've stopped waiting for a moment that fixes everything, because I don't think that moment exists.